Welcome to another episode of Comedy Wham Presents with me, your host, Valerie, and sometime kitty co-hosts Miss Purrington and Mookie. ComedyWham.com is your place to go for features about all Austin comedy. In addition to podcasts, Comedy Wham brings you articles, album reviews, our advice column, all of my Austin Chronicle articles about the Austin comedy scene. Check out our listings of festivals from across the country and the world. And to narrowcast, our Cap City Comedy Club FPIA contest page is live tracking the 2024 contest. Our most popular feature is our events page for live comedy shows in Austin, Houston, and DFW, where 100% of the entries you see come from comics and producers. Click the Submit a Show button from the top of the homepage or events page to fill out the survey to get your show listed. It's free and easy. Tag us on your Instagram stories and we'll share your show promo to our Instagram followers. And we also offer paid promo boosts also for Instagram. Want to support these resources that we provide? You can donate to Comedy Wham on PayPal, Venmo, or even Patreon. Click the Support CW icon on our homepage to see the ways that you can help us. Our podcast was launched in 2016 to bring you funny people and their stories. As a fan, I like to delve into a comic's background and motivations and would usually take a detour along the way. Consider the interview a way for you to get to know the folks that make the comedy scene as fascinating off stage as it is on stage. If you like this podcast, please rate and review us. Today, we are talking to somebody who is in an elite class of comics who got their starts long before they could legally drink. She's an LA-based comic, writer, podcaster, and actor. You might have seen her in HBO Max's Sex Lives of College Girls. Her podcast is called Stay Positive. Hopefully I enunciated that right. And P.S. I love seeing past Comedy Wham guest Lexi Grace as one of her guests. Her debut special, Funt, is out now, and she was one of the 6 comics featured in the PBS Roots of Comedy with Jesus Trejo series, which highlights our guest's background as our guest today, as her background as a 4th-generation Chinese and Japanese American, and her story and background actually brought me to tears. It was very, very powerful. And now Comedy Wham presents our guest, Sierra Katow. Katow. I told you I was going to butcher it.
It's totally fine. I love it. Yes, thank you so much for having me on, Valerie. This is lovely. Thank you for the beautiful intro. And yes, I am also a big Lexi Grace fan. That's so awesome to hear that she was on. Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for sharing this lovely show with me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad that you found your way towards me and based here in Austin. Have you spent any of your comedy time in Austin at all?
Oh man, only vicariously through friends. No, I never really have. I'm LA really started, and I did a bit in Boston, but then none in Austin, but a lot of friends. So I remember coming up in the Comedy Store a little bit out here in LA, and a lot of Comedy Store friends like moved to Austin kind of around 2020-ish, right?
Yeah.
And I remember like starting out doing Kill Tony and doing like all these really, these at the time they were kind of, I remember when Tony Hinchcliffe kind of came around and was introducing it to us as like, yeah, just put your name in the bucket, because we were all there for the Comedy Store potluck, which was just the regular, open mic there to try to break into the Comedy Store. And then he had this separate show in the Belly Room at the time that nobody really knew about. That was called Kill Tony. And he was like, you do 1 minute and it's in front of, Comedy Store regulars. It's in front of your heroes. And like, we give you critiques. And I signed up and kind of started doing it every so often. I was still in college at the time, so I'd only come back in the summer and be able to do it, but they were always, hilarious. And it was a wacky show. And then, yeah, it's been kind of fun to see it blow up even more and like, to really find its home in Austin. So among other friends who have just moved there to do comedy, of course, but yes, it's I hear the lore from afar.
Yeah. Well, one other a random connection, which we'll touch on almost immediately, is you being in a class of comics who got their start really, really early on. One of my favorites that I know of is Sophie Buttle, who's Canadian, who's now based in LA and does a lot, but she tours so much too that I don't know if you've intersected with her.
Oh, yes, yes. No, I love Sophie. Yeah, she's so funny. And yeah, I think I've seen her perform quite a few times, just like in random LA shows. But but I also just love her clips online. I think I've come
Yes.
around to maybe probably seeing more online than I have of her in real life, which is funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yes, so good.
Well, Sierra, I actually, I know we've kind of done a little bit of an icebreaker here, but I actually do have an official icebreaker question for you. Are you ready?
Uh-oh. Uh-huh.
I should have my pen ready, and I don't, but that's fine. That's why we have this recorded. Okay. One word to describe your past.
My past. Okay, wait. Can I ask a qualifying question? Any past or comedy past?
I leave it very open-ended.
Oh, ambiguous. Okay. Hmm. Probably like very blessed. Blessed. One word. Yeah, I like, yeah, if you want me to delve into explanation, I feel, it's as I get older, trying to be more kind of aware of self-aware. And I think I've had a really great, time leading up to this point in my life. I think we can always find oh, I wish I could have done this differently, or I wish I should have, had this different
Sure.
upbringing or whatever. But I think like I've been very grateful. And I think especially with the comedy stuff, I started when I was 16, as we've talked about, and it's sort of this thing where you kind of have a weird changing relationship with comedy. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't want to do it anymore. It's too hard. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm so, I've been doing it for a very long time. What do I have to show for it? And then other times it's like, oh, I'm really glad I started early because it's really like evolved with me. I've learned so much about myself. I've been able to kind of come out of my shell a lot more than I would have. It's brought me this great career. So I think there's definitely kind of a time right now where I'm starting to be more just generally like grateful for all the things that I've been able to do. Starting with my past.
Yeah. Everybody really does need to go see your episode and everybody's episode. I binge watched it. I
Oh
started
yeah.
watching with yours because I'm like, I've got this interview. I need to, see this perspective. And I loved the whole approach that it's kind of documentary
Mm-hmm.
style. I just loved it so much that I ended up binge watching all 6 episodes
Oh yeah, yeah. I
yesterday.
mean,
It was just
I
incredible.
I loved all the episodes. I really didn't like meet a ton of the comics in person, right? Just Jesus, who was an amazing host, and I'd known him through comedy, and he's another Comedy Store guy, and like it was so cool to get to spend more time with him and kind of hear his story as well.
Yeah.
And then every other comic, like I maybe I known of Vanessa, I'd known obviously Austin,
Uh-huh.
Vanessa, Gonzalez, and like who else? I mean, I guess I don't know if I think I met on a Adam Posse on a Zoom show one time, but he's in Seattle. So, and then everyone else I'd never met in person. So it was like fascinating to just learn about all these comedians, different
Yeah.
cities,
Yeah.
their different stories, what they kind of like. I was really struck by Elon Stribling's episode where he's like also a nature like
Yeah.
environmentalist conservationist
Yeah.
expert, like he's doing fly fishing while he's also doing his show later at the Denver Comedy Works. And yeah, it was everybody. Tatanka Means, everyone had just really cool differing like versions of how they did their comedy, and I thought that was really fun
Yeah.
to see.
It's very well done. I was writing a friend. I said I binge watched the whole thing. If I had my my wish list or bucket list, this is the kind of show that I would wish to produce. I
Oh
love doing
yeah,
my
yeah.
podcast. I've been doing the podcast forever, but what the whole PBS and Jesus team and the comics that were selected was just incredible. Um,
Oh yeah.
but in the short package, we get the answer to the question that I often start with is, how what was your relationship to comedy growing up? And the answer comes in the PBS answer very show very clearly, but why don't you tell us about
Yeah. Yeah, I think I was lucky to kind of have, I think my parents both are really funny, and in particular I feel like they kind of were really respectful of people who are funny. It was like, oh, if, of course, liking movies and comedians and stuff, but just people in our lives. Like my grandpa was funny and like was a cartoonist. So there was sort of this reverence for like doing, doodling. And we always had like paper and pens around to draw stuff. Um, and if somebody was funny or there was like kind of like a relation to them, we kind of felt like closer with them if they made us laugh, and I think that value was very, now that I look back, very present, even though in the moment, you're like, it's like a fish swimming in water. You don't really know that that could be different than other ways to live. So I think my family being uh funny and having a sense of humor and knowing that's important. And I really didn't know much about like stand-up comedy specifically. I kind of hadn't seen a ton, and I didn't have like cable. So I think when I first got cable, I was around the time when I started doing stand-up, which was like 16.
Okay.
And so I realized, the Comedy Central existed. They had the half hours going. At the time, I think it was like maybe who was the up and coming hot comics were like Elijah Schlesinger and Amy Schumer, and like the more experienced ones obviously were there as well. But I think those were kind of like the young up and comers at the time, which is pretty funny. And then, yeah, I just got really into like the idea that you could do stand-up comedy. I think I was never really like a theater person or didn't really do anything performing really outside of I did like speeches for running for student government. So I think stand-up seemed the closest to that. And I would put jokes in my speeches. So I kind of liked getting laughs. And anyway, so that was like my approach to stand-up comedy was just like, oh, well, I guess you can give like a funny speech, but not have to be running for a position in government.
Yeah.
And that sounds great. So I started going to open mics around that time and really, yeah, really loved it. I think I was always a kind of in the classroom say I was a nerd, of course, a big nerd and like maybe a little quieter, and I didn't really want to be quiet. Like I think I felt like there were things that I wanted to say, or I loved the idea of being a class clown, but I certainly was not. So I kind of helped me get out of my shell and be a little bit more like realize that I had that possibility, which I think is valuable for a young woman, a young Asian woman growing up. But yeah, so that kind of was how I got into it all. And I think, yeah, I credit a lot that there was definitely a reverence for humor in my upbringing.
And so you started at an open mic in LA?
Yeah, I think first time was open mic at Burbank Flappers out here, Flappers Comedy Club, which was newish at the time. I think, if it was 2012 or 2011, I don't remember exactly, but yeah, I think it had kind of just opened and they had a food menu. So, or, it was a restaurant technically. So you could go in even if you were under 21 versus like Comedy Store is pretty strict. Like you had to wait outside, go in and then come back out after your set. And like only go inside obviously if you got selected in that open mic lottery. And then there was like Laugh Factory, I think also is pretty strict. I mean, anything where there was pretty much just a bar, I think that was tough. So yeah, so Flappers actually ended up being friendlier to the youngs.
So I want to imagine the conversation in your household. You're 16, you're in high school, you have figured out somehow that there are open mics. I mean, you're in LA. I don't know if you even realize the amount of comedy that is in LA, because I have a high school graduate, so their universe in high school is just whatever is around them directly, and that's it. So you figured out an open mic. Did you ask permission to go to the open mic? Did you drive yourself to the open mic?
Right. I had to ask permission because I couldn't drive. I think I didn't have my license by then. I got it probably a little bit later. Even though maybe, yeah, I think I was 16, but I think I got it when I was 17. But anyway, so yeah, they fully drove me there. They facilitated and enabled this. Yeah, so credit to them. I think they didn't realize I was going to turn it into a real, job at some point. Probably would have thought twice about it if they knew that. But no, I think they're the type of parents who, had gone to all my basketball games. I was like, even though definitely didn't have a future in basketball, I was a 5-foot child, played basketball from, I think, second grade to like 10th grade. So I think right around the time that I quit basketball, which, was the right thing to do, I think, given that I was always very overly too small to play. There was I was looking into doing stand-up comedy, so I think to them they were like, oh, another hobby of hers. Well, we drove
Yeah.
her to her basketball game, so I guess we'll drive her to this, even though very different demographic, and not playing other
Yeah.
high schoolers, definitely a lot of like 40-year-old men, but no, all, and I think they also had my safety in mind, so they would like go in with me, or at a certain point, wait for me to be done, which was nice, and just wait nearby and come pick me up, which is again very nice because I didn't live too close to all these places. I'm in kind of a suburb called La Cañada out here in Los Angeles, so it's like not close to West Hollywood's, let's say, where all the clubs were at the time. So they did facilitate at that time, and I think I was lucky. I think they also, it was few and far between, but I think they also enjoyed, trying to see what exactly I had and why I wanted to do that. And
Yeah.
it was probably entertaining for a bit, even though they had to sit through a lot of open micers that were really
Oof.
rough, including myself, but some were rougher.
So what's really fascinating, or among the many things that are fascinating about you, are the fact that you went to a college that, by all accounts, everybody thinks is incredibly difficult to get into. So you've got the academic chops to pursue anything that you want. So I could certainly see your parents being, in the back, oh, this is just a hobby. This is just a hobby. She'll get over it because she's going to Harvard, and she's
Totally
gonna get immersed in some kind of
surely she'll have her head
yeah.
screwed on right and do something practical. Surely if we send her off to this school and for 4 years she'll learn to do something actually worthwhile. But no, I studied computer science, so I was also, as I mentioned, a nerd. I was a real computer nerd growing up. I like taught myself to code when I was younger, and like loved to do all these like kind of web development projects on my own. And I think what I liked about it was the creative aspect. So the coding was also very satisfying. But I think going to college there and knowing I wanted to do comedy too, so it's a great school for that, even as weird as that is. Like, obviously it's close to Boston, there's a great scene there. I did some of that. I wasn't as involved as a typical comedian because I was still in school, but there was a club called the Comedy Studio that I would go to a lot. That's in Cambridge, Massachusetts, like in Harvard Square, kind of at the time. I think I lived below it, or I lived in the kind of almost an attached building. So that's how convenient that was. And there was like on campus stuff, of course. I think college is a great time right when people start comedy because you have these like built-in audience. I was like often opening for like other types of performances. I think I opened for like a wushu group. So like I did stand up, and then this group came in and was like doing swords and like,
Wow.
because it'd be like variety shows and you just want stage time and audience. And it was a great place to develop material, although very insular audience, right? It's very specific, 18 to 21-year-old Harvard students for the most part. And then, but yes, I studied computer science, so kind of kept my good, Asian ways of like, okay, we're going to get a degree. My parents were at least had that reassurance that there was some sort of fallback, or at least they thought maybe I would just go into tech, and then, maybe comedy could still remain this hobby, or a good skill to have. But I think because I got involved with the Lampoon, the Harvard Lampoon is like a humor magazine. They've turned out a lot of great comedy writers, and Conan O'Brien and like people like that. So I knew that was something I wanted to join going in, because if I wanted to do a career in TV comedy, that seemed like a good pre-professional thing. I didn't really know what it was. But upon joining, it's basically like a humor magazine, but it's also, like a social club where like everybody, has hopefully aspirations to go into comedy, but also just friends that I've made that are lifelong friends. And I think because I got involved in that, there was a little bit more of like, oh, I see some friends graduate, they're working for, a TV show, and writing for different ones that I just would have never known could be possible, because I really didn't have much insight into how to work in TV, even though growing up in LA, you see some people, like some
Definitely.
friends' parents, I'm sure, like I think maybe in my public school I went to, occasionally like one child actor would come through for like a
Uh-huh.
year and then disappear and go to private school or something. But yeah, I didn't have much like, insight into that. So I think that was what was great about that part of college, was learning like, oh yeah, there's some sort of path here. So yeah, long-winded way to be like, it Harvard both like helped me justify doing comedy a little bit because I had this like degree, but
Yeah.
also showed me that there was a path to maybe doing a TV career.
And was because some people that start in stand up, that's all they want to do is just stand up. So were you already, I mean, just from the way you described your uh, your awareness of the TV comedy, is that something that you kind of had a line of sight to fairly early?
Yeah, I'm not sure where or when I first became aware, but I think when I learned that, oh, TV writers write TV.
Yeah,
Or there's writers that, there's a
yeah,
room of writers and that's a job. And it's a
yeah.
very, I think it's a very creative thing. And I think everybody kind of glamorizes the idea of like being in a room with funny people.
Mhm.
And a lot of the reason I went into stand-up comedy, obviously, wanting to do it and being a fan of it, but I think I wanted to like be around funny people and laugh a lot. And you'd certainly get that with stand-up, but it's a little isolating. I think people don't realize that stand-up can be isolating because say you're touring or you're doing unless you're touring with another friend and doing a co-headlining thing
Yeah,
or a multiple, comedian lineup, like you're pretty much alone. And sometimes even if you're performing locally, I mostly just perform around LA, you go to the show and you have fun with your friends there, but then you go home and,
yeah,
you're not working with other people developing your material. So I think when I heard that, TV writing was kind of what I liked about stand up, getting to be with funny people and collaborating, but with more collaboration, I guess, I kind of found that to be more interesting. And again, didn't really, those are those tough careers where it's like, well, at least with stand up, you can try it out and know if you like it or don't, like pretty quickly. TV writing, it's hard because you have to get a job in one of these rooms and you don't know. So I kind of assumed it would be fine, but then, of course, I didn't know for sure until I started working like kind of as a writer's assistant. And then I was like, okay, this is great. I'm glad I, went down this path, but you never know. It might not be for you, right? And it takes a little bit more time to find that out.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, I guess I did have some sights on that. A lot of it was honestly like loving a certain show. I think I remember looking up like Futurama
Hmm.
writers and then seeing that they went to Harvard and were in the Lampoon, but they studied physics. Like David X. Cohen, one of the creators, is like
Wow.
he like was a physics major, but then made Futurama. So that was always very cool to me. It was like, oh wow, I
Yeah.
guess you can just do that. But he's a very unique person, obviously. But yeah, it was a little bit of Wikipediaing people's bios for
Uh-huh.
sure to understand what exactly the path could be to TV writing, even though everyone's is different.
Yeah. So when you graduated, what you, with your awareness and with your experience at that point, you chose, if I did my research, you chose to go back to LA. You could have gone to New York or even stayed in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
What informed your choice about heading back to LA?
Sure. I mean, I think LA was definitely the most affordable choice for me because
Mm,
I could move back home.
true.
So full transparency, yeah, I was able to move back home, and I think that's so much easier. Oh my God. I mean, I have friends, of course, who are not from here. They move out here. It's hard. You got to get a car. You got to get out your driver's license, maybe if you haven't yet, because you
Oh
lived in a city
gosh.
that didn't need it, right?
Yeah.
Or like, it's definitely find an apartment, of course, all the things that go into moving to a new city, especially if you don't have a lot of people there that right? So I like had the much easier path. I think if I had gone to New York or stayed in Boston, yeah, it just would have been a lot more expensive and a lot newer. And
Yeah.
then the thing too, I think, is I had like some, because I had done a lot of stand up here in LA over the summers and everything when I had started out here. I just felt like I had more to come back to. So I kind of had my little ins at like the Laugh Factory and like would
Yeah.
do the do go to the Comedy Store and be selected a little bit more, like just know people and know more stand-ups. And that's why everybody says like if they move to a new city, it feels like they're starting over, you know?
Right, right.
So I didn't want to start over really. And in retrospect, I probably could have, and it would have been okay. But you know, you're in that mindset at the time where you're like, I've built all these relationships.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
have all these, you know, things going for me. But it was fine. You know, I was very barely anything. But I think yeah, that was kind of the comfort of coming back to a familiar place where I had done some comedy already.
yeah. Do you remember landing your first writing job?
Oh yeah, I mean, I guess probably the first, yeah, I would maybe consider my first being like the writer's assistant job that I
Mm.
got. But you know, that was all credit too. So I had like I got representation through doing stand up. So like I had been in Last Comic
Right,
Standing when I was like a junior in college or third year in college, and
right.
so that, yeah, which was great. And you know what a stroke of luck, right? Talk about blessed past. So that was really a good exposure. And then I think from that I got representation or some you know, had like a Laugh Factory clip, got me some auditions that got me representation. And so through those um agents, I think, let's see, yes, they got me this writer's assistant gig with Cameron Esposito and River Butcher had a
Oh,
show called Take My Wife on, at the time it was CISO, which was like an NBC streaming app just for
uh-huh.
comedy, and it has since
Oh,
shuttered, but
oh,
the show is on Stars. But it was you know, one of their clients, and so yeah, got me that meeting and I got that first job. And I think that was like, man, such a godsend for like being able to be in a room with funny people, writing funny stuff, writing also
yeah.
like, you know, about stand-up comedians, because the leads were both stand-up comedians. So there's, you know,
Right.
some background there that I could at least understand and contribute to. Yeah, so that was like, I think also a very, and I've had a lot of good luck with jobs where everybody's been really great and very open to, you know, being very supportive to young up and coming writer person who, you know, enters the fray. So that was no exception. And I think that really made me, yeah, more excited that I'd gone down this path, because it's a little bit more of an office job, I would say. So there are some stand-ups, of course, who are like, man, I could never do that, you
Yeah,
know, or like they do it once and they're like, ah, sure, it's good money, but like, you know, you're still in an office with a boss, something that a lot of people want to avoid. And I get that. But I might maybe more on that side where I'm like, sometimes I need a little structure and I like to have, you know, coworkers and maybe
sure.
a coffee machine, you know, why not throw in some snacks?
Yeah,
Um, and you know, I think I am happy to wake up and go to work. And you know, I don't know, I guess the nightlife of stand up can be super fun too, but you know, I
yeah,
think maybe I need a little thing to break up that schedule. So so that's what I found is I thrived in that environment a little bit.
yeah. You've had, I guess since then, quite a whirlwind of experiences between um, that last comic standing to getting the writing work to landing a role on, you know, just got renewed for a third season, or maybe it's already filmed its third season of these Sex Lives of College Girls. Did I get this
Yeah,
whole
yeah.
thing?
No, yeah, you nailed that. It's a tough one. A lot of people, I feel like, because it's such a, it's also a lot, it's the kind of show that goes to my spam. Like it's like if somebody sends me an
Oh
email
yeah,
with that in the title, it goes to my spam because I think it's like a profane,
yeah,
like, ooh,
right.
scandalous, which it is. It is a little scandalous. There's definitely some scandalous stuff in there, but it's such a funny show. But yes, so yes, it's been, I was very happy to be a part of that.
Yeah, and then you just launched your debut special. I mean, it's so much good headed your way. Those
Oh
PBS.
no.
I mean, are
Oh.
you a little overwhelmed by like this rapid pace of things that are opportunities that are coming your way?
No, that's very kind. I think it's all been pretty um long time coming. You know, I think as things get released, it seems like bam, bam, oh my God, it's up. But it's
Yeah,
like, oh well, we filmed this special like a year ago, and then
yeah,
you know, little movie magic just peek behind the curtain. And then, Roots of Comedy also like 6 months ago or something. So everything's pretty spaced out, and
Yeah.
and things don't take too long to shoot once you're in production. It's more of like, the development stuff, of course, if you're a part of like even like for Sex Lives of College Girls, it's so fun to be a part of. But I'm like a minor actor in that, so I get to come in and show up and do awesome lines, and then go home. But it's like the creators and the writers and everybody, they're the ones who are like working all hours and early on and months leading up, making sure it all works out. So I think, it's all varying how much involvement it is. But I think that's kind of what is nice about this job is it's very like stand up is so multifaceted, right? You kind of have to do a bunch of crap, right? You're like editing yourself, you're also directing yourself, you're also like saying lines and writing your jokes. And so I think when you go into other parts of entertainment and you're just writing or you're just acting, like there's a little part of you that like misses the other parts of it, So I think that's why I like to do a lot of stuff, because it's like, oh man, I was just writing on a show for a while and I kind of miss performing. So I'm glad I have a show, a stand-up show to do, or a podcast. I think there's really like I think stand-up spoils you in the sense that like you do get like full control of the creative. And so when you're kind of just one facet of a project, you're like, oh man, I missed that other part, what's going on? So I think that's been the philosophy for a while, is just like, oh, okay, I'd like to, the hunger for doing a lot of projects and being able to wear a lot of hats is super fun and just prevalent. And then hopefully someday, getting to do something where I have a little bit more control of one thing so I can pour myself into one project. I think as you ascend, say in the writer's room, you do have to wear a lot of hats, and that can be tough. But like, for instance, my bosses on shows who are showrunners, right? Like they're casting and they're writing and they're hiring and they're doing the budget and they're editing and they're doing like all these other creative things. And, that's sort of something that mimics, I think, stand up in that way, where you're like getting to do a lot and having a lot of say in the final product.
Yeah. Netflix put a little bug in my ear this past week, and I was very excited when I saw the IMDb. I was looking separately. I was looking at your IMDb credits and saw that you are a writer on the soon to be out Exploding Kittens cartoon.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, it's out. It's just recent. But no. Yeah. That, I mean, super fun, great name, right? Like I don't know if you're familiar, it was a card game. And so that's okay. You have it. Okay. Well, and then of course kittens. So I should have known. Yes. I mean, it's so fun. I think like the creator of the card game, and then also like the illustrator, right? So he has that very distinct style. It gets translated into the show, which is so cool. I think it looks really great. I think, I was in the writer's room, so it was like honestly, like I think it was at least over a year ago, maybe 2 years, because we had the strike too. So that postponed some things. But you really only get to see like, oh, here we have like some concept art for potential scenes, but really not a lot of visuals at the time. It was like, we write the scripts and then kind of, okay, bye. And then you kind of don't see anything for a while. So it's just been so fun to like see what they came up with in the time that we were gone, that I was gone. And like, all the characters look amazing. I think the voices are so funny and great. And we kind of got to see some casting. So it was like fun to see that come to fruition. But it's just a great show. And again, the creator, let's see, he also has the online comic called The Oatmeal that I remember reading when I was younger. So it was like super cool to work with him, because it was kind of like a childhood hero moment. And his humor, is in the show. Like it's very much like a lot of his distinct voice. And so I think that was really fun to kind of be a part of and see how that got translated into like a full little animated series. And they did a great job with it. So I encourage anyone to watch. I think it's a really fun, let's see, I guess like 4.5 hours of your time, because it's like 9 episodes, half hour. So not that much. You can binge it in like an afternoon. I've done it. So when you're done with Roots of Comedy, head on over to Exploding Kittens. A little different, a slightly different tone, I'm sure you realized. But that's funny. Did you used to like, I don't know, did you ever play the game a lot, or like
I did,
other games?
My son. I think we had Oh, I know we bought another game. I just can't remember because I do know we played the Exploding Kittens quite a bit, and we were following the oatmeal stuff as
Oh, cool.
well.
Mhm.
And then my son just, got to teenagerhood, and it was like, yeah,
That's
that's
too
yeah,
young now. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, cute. Classic stage, I suppose. They've got
yeah,
to abandon the old ways to
yes,
ascend to new levels.
yeah, yeah. But now I can say, hey, I talked to one of the writers, so we have to watch the show.
Oh, yeah.
And it's such a cool thing
Awesome.
that comics get involved with. I mean, there's so many cartoon or animated shows that are, built on the writing and the talent of comics. So it's
Yeah.
very cool that you've got your foot in
Oh,
that
yeah.
door. Yeah.
No, I feel again, yeah, a very lucky job to get. And yeah, and talk about like I think every time you're in a room, there's such a different variety of like different comedians. You have some stand-ups, a lot of improvisers, which I think improv is a great skill to have for the writers' room, probably more useful than stand-up because you're
Yeah.
just having to come up with ideas off the top of your head.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of performance to a writer's room too. And like, yeah, and writers from like more digital background. I think it's just really fun because you get a bunch of different perspectives on comedy in one place and see how that really like synergizes.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, with the time that we have, I feel like we've covered a lot of ground in your career so far. We haven't spent too much time about talking about your special
Oh yeah.
Funt, which I'll let you define how you came up with that term. It's very cute, very cute.
Thank you.
I don't know if cute is what you
Mhm.
were going for, but it's
Oh no, yeah, cute, whatever you want it to be. Yeah, I mean, Funt is so in my special, the joke is really that it stands for fun aunt because I get to talk about being an aunt and being an aunt or however people pronounce it. And because I have a nephew now. But I mean, yeah, I think what I love about it and having it big letters on a poster for a comedy special is that it's fun cunt, to everybody else out there. I think it it looks like that and it sounds like that and it gives you the giggles. And I think
uh,
that's what I like about it. But it's a fun word to say for sure.
yeah,
And
for
it
sure.
wasn't taken. It wasn't taken yet. So, that's a big thing now. We got to think about search engine optimization.
Yes.
Right? I mean, yeah, comedy wham, everybody when they see comedy wham, they're like, I know what that is. I know
Yeah.
Valerie, so you gotta stand out somehow. And so that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
But yeah.
funny little trivia. Speaking of that search engine optimization, which is me just scrolling down. Basically, it is a fun little trivia fact that if you scroll to the very end of your YouTube channel, you
Oh yeah.
find these very old programmer tutorials,
Yes. Oh
which
yeah.
I
Deep
thought, oh my
cut.
God.
Deep cut, Valerie. Yeah. Wow, you really nobody's really ever done that before. So that's
Yeah.
really impressive. Yes, so my YouTube channel, which has been around for many years now, the first episodes, the first videos I ever uploaded were PHP coding tutorials. The way that I learned how to code, when I was a young person, was watching YouTube tutorials and some books, but yeah, YouTube tutorials, and of course that's the way everybody learns to do anything now. So yeah, I think I had a quick turnaround where I was like, hey, YouTube tutorials, I can make one now too. So I made them and I had a little microphone. I think I bought a little external microphone to record my voice and I sound like a baby because I was probably like 12. I don't know. And then I had, yeah, I feel like it's a similar trajectory to doing stand up where I like learned that stand up was a thing and then started doing it. And not giving it a lot of time to actually sink in or learn how to do it. But why not participate in the noise of the internet?
Yeah. This is the worst possible transition that anybody could make, but I'm going to make it because I'm willing to put myself out there. It is, I think it is charming that you haven't pulled those down because it is part of who you are and
Yeah.
part of your identity. And I think that's probably one of the strongest messages. I'm going to take this back to the roots of comedy.
Mhm.
Your identity comes through so strongly in, your background as a Japanese American, Chinese background. That is so important to who you are, and it comes through your comedy. And I think it is really cool that you actually kept those videos as opposed to scrubbing that out of existence for, most people to see that. I
Yeah, yeah.
To me, it's a bigger message that you actually kept that.
Oh, oh, thank you. Yeah, that's very sweet. Honestly, yeah, I'm probably just out of laziness and not realizing it was still
Well, that
up.
too.
But no, I think there's definitely a pressure, and I think with uh comedy, everybody, where it's like pick your lane, this is you,
Yeah.
like don't show that you do other things so people don't get confused, and that, yeah, and that's a lot still comes up even within like entertainment. Are you a writer? Are you an actor? Are you a stand-up? Choose kind of. And I just, yeah, I don't necessarily believe in that because I think we're all human beings who have a lot of different interests. And I think if I do the same thing all the time, I think I get bored of it, or I get kind of sick of it, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think, yeah, everybody has, I love finding out when, I mean, kind of going back to Roots of Comedy, like you're saying, but like seeing the other comedians having other interests or doing other things or seeing what their families like, just really, it's like, oh yeah, we're not just telling jokes all the time, of course that's important, but there's who are you to, I guess, who are you and what are you bringing to your jokes, and how is that different than the next guy, right? And I think all that stuff is really, yeah, it's fun when I learn a little extra about a comedian friend, because I think we have the pressure of being like, branding. We gotta make
Yeah.
sure it's very, yeah, single note, and make sure our Instagram looks a certain way so that everybody can market us accordingly.
Yeah.
But it's just not that way anymore, I think.
Yeah. It's high pressure. Are there things that you think from just being the computer scientist, an educated computer scientist, with a formal 4-year degree that helps you navigate the stand-up career?
Hmm. I mean, truthfully, like I think things that I learned, I probably have forgotten. I think especially computer science. They do their best to teach you things that are kind of more abstract, so it doesn't become obsolete, because everything will become obsolete in like 2 months.
Yeah.
Especially at this rate, right? But what I really loved about what I think was valuable about going to get a degree, and of course, I think the I think the kind of one thing is a lot of people might think, hey, you don't really need a degree to do comedy. So is it a waste? Right. But
Yeah.
what was good about computer science? Well, one thing, I did do it freelance for a while, and you can't, starting out as a writer's assistant or anything in entertainment or stand-up comedy, you're not making money. So you can't really support yourself. So unless you get substantial help somehow, you really have to have like a side hustle or a quote unquote real job so you can figure out how to pay the bills. So I think that
Yeah.
really helped. And that was very useful to come in having that degree, being able to pick up a freelance job that allowed me to do my other work as well. Like I think, I mean, even up until the time I was a full writer in a room, I was still holding these freelance jobs because I could do them on my downtime. I could, I mean, probably shouldn't say, but like even as a writer assistant, I was in the like trailer, when we were on set still coding, because I'm not getting paid a ton. And yeah, you got to just figure out how to kind of fill in the gaps. So
Yeah.
that was very nice versus, getting another job where I would have to physically be somewhere else. I think the coding thing was remote. So that was great. But separately, I think what was that, going to a college that I was able to take a lot of different classes. Computer science, I had a certain amount of requirements, but it wasn't a ton. So I would take my computer science classes, and then I would take, I would try to take as many like history classes. I was a history minor, so I would try to take all these classes that would kind of help educate me a bit on just the world, because I'm from one city. I'm from, a suburb in Los Angeles. I don't know anything about anybody, and I hadn't lived anywhere else my whole life. And I was finally for college. But again, you're in a college campus, that's a bubble. So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
trying to, just going to meet a lot of different people, learn different points of view, and knowing that if I did want to go into comedy, I didn't want to be ignorant and just be like making horrible jokes that were gonna like hurt a bunch of people and be bad for society. Not
Yeah.
that anybody does that too much, but I think that I was trying to at least get a little bit more understanding of the world so I could, you know, write and make things that were going to be constructive and productive rather than the opposite. And I still, yeah, take some things from that, but who knows? I think, of course, everything's changed a lot and you got to keep learning. But I think that was kind of the main takeaway is even though I was a computer science major, there was a lot of other, classes to be had and things to learn. And I think that's very valuable. And I'm, again, very lucky to have been able to get that education because obviously it's not, I don't take it lightly.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
I
the long-winded way. Another ramble from me.
I think being informed is a very useful skill for a comic, Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, we gotta be, I guess.
My take is always, in that first year, sure, you can write all the dick and fart jokes that you want, but how about
Yeah,
let's be a little more expansive than that.
sure. And look, I still have them, they're great. Every so often you got to break up some of the tough stuff, the more deeper stuff with some dick and fart, but
Yeah. Sure.
hopefully a good variety.
I had written some questions. Usually I let the conversation free flow, but I did write some questions. So there's one I want to go back to. I think I didn't put it in my introduction, but one of the things that really moved me watching the Roots of Comedy is when you and Jesus were walking through the Japanese American Museum. My son and I went to LA last year, and we went to that museum, and it was very powerful to read more about the story. We, as somebody who's kept an eye on culture, you can't escape George Takei's experiences. That he's been very vocal about his experience
Yeah.
in internment camps, and then just seeing like the details and just the pain of that time in American history, which is just so so disturbing. So the question that I wanted to ask, because you do write from your perspective as an Asian, given that you talked about in that in the episode about the evolution of your own writing from the Asian point of view, like your relationship to being an Asian and being a comic. How do you think that evolution that you've had has informed your writing in a writing room?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think occasionally it gets to come up. I think it's so, sometimes you're writing for you might be writing for a show and it's not relevant.
Yeah,
But
Exploding
almost
Kittens may not,
right. And you would think so that's the one thing I was gonna say Exploding Kittens, but then there's a you know the family in that is Asian American. Like the mom is voiced by Susie Nakamura. And so that was like a really fun detail. And I didn't, introduce that into the show. That was already existing when I came in. So occasionally, it was like, oh yeah, this is kind of cool. What are the odds?
Yeah.
Of course, everybody talks about the fact that, growing up, we didn't have this, but that is kind of that was something fun about that. But yeah, in the writer's room, I think it comes up in the sense of like you're being a little bit more, you're in a group of people that often I think these days, but honestly, my whole time being a writer, my bosses or whoever's hiring has done a good job of bringing a lot of different perspectives into the room. So I think coming in knowing like, okay, yes, I might be an Asian American writer. There's also, there's like queer writers and Black writers and, anyone across the board who might be bringing their perspective, or maybe you might not know right away what their identity is because it's not visible. And then, they share it in the room. So I think it's like being sensitive to that everybody has a different story that they're coming from.
Yeah.
And I think having a little bit more open-mindedness or empathy just as a human being. But I think like because I've had my own experiences maybe not being heard or not being being on the butt of a joke or something where you're used to wanting to take back control. I think that's only been valuable being on the flip side of like, oh, hey, now I'm actually in a room full of people who have had that experience because, similar to mine or even more so, or they're older, they've been through more, so then they have like a whole different perspective they could share with me. And like more literally, sure, there are sometimes characters who are Asian in the show, and then I feel like I get to kind of bring that perspective occasionally,
Uh-huh.
not always like right away. Like I think I like the idea that, we're trying to make a funny show first and we're going to bring the jokes, and as long as nothing like super problematic comes up, it's like you don't really have to um bring up anything too heavy-handed maybe, but then
Yeah.
at some point along the line, I feel like it's like, oh hey, what if we did a fun episode where like you kind of introduce this part of your experience, and maybe it doesn't go, and not because it's bad, but just because like it doesn't fit into the tone. But like every so often, that sort of element where like in stand-up comedy I might talk about it right away because that's kind of, you know audiences are used to that, you talking about your identity, but in a room maybe it's a little bit later and a little bit softer because you're also having to just make the show. That maybe that wasn't the premise of the show, but I
Yeah.
would say final point, I think that when you're pitching your own show, right, that's where you get to come up with your idea and make your whole
Oh,
thing. And I think those are the times where I've kind of had to really really dig deep and tap into that identity to realize, okay, what am I trying to say here, what would this show be about?
mhm.
I get kind of carte blanche to make it whatever at this point where you're pitching it. So what would that look like? And I think that's where it comes out the most, and maybe too much, because maybe it's like, you know kind of you want to break from yourself, and then you go to work and you're writing about yourself, but 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 yeah, so I think it's kind of like it varies, and you kind of feel out when's the right time to really bring this perspective, and when is it actually not about me, and like maybe we're talking about someone else's story, and that's going to be just as like then you get to realize like more of how you listen and respect other stories too.
Yeah. Wow. Uh, Fascinating. And I'm sure the writer's room has for good changed, from what the writer's room probably was even 10, definitely 20, definitely 30, 40 and beyond years ago. So uh
Yeah, and yeah, I think it's like it's always evolving, and it depends on the rooms, right? Like it's like I think it's a really top down situation where if the executive producer is setting the right tone and being like super open to all that, like then you're in luck.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
think more and more are that way, so that's really good.
yeah. Well, Sarah, this has been an amazing conversation. As we wind
Oh,
down, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want to make sure you let the world know about?
oh, I, yeah, thank you so much. You've been lovely. I was really, you've let me go on ad nauseum about myself, which I could always appreciate. But I mean, the one thing I'll plug is I have a new podcast with a couple friends called TV Chef Fantasy League. If you're just looking for something
Oh, okay.
fun, completely unrelated to listen to, but we kind of came together because we were friends of fans of Top Chef.
Uh-huh.
We did a fantasy league for that season. That
Oh,
season ended, and now we're on to Master Chef. So we're kind of going to do like I'm not sure what the next show is, but kind of a year-round whatever show that's related to chefing, related to cooking, and doing like a fun competitive fantasy league element to it where you draft the contestants. So I did that with my friends Mike Cabalon and Ifi Wadiwe, who are also hilarious comedians and actors. And yeah, so that's available on Maximum Fun Network if anybody is
nice.
interested. But yeah, thank you, Valerie. I mean, it's been so. Thank you for watching all those things.
Yeah.
I know that's a lot of homework you had to do there, but I appreciate it.
Fine. Okay, so I'm gonna have my formal closing, but first I have to ask you my official closing question, which
Oh,
which is one word to describe your future.
oh, right. Uh, hmm. Hopefully balanced. I
Oh,
want to say. I think a little, as we're talking about, doing lots of things, but like being a whole person and having some balance between
yeah,
work and life and comedy and not comedy.
yeah, that is important. That
Yeah.
is. All right, well, that is a wrap on Comedy Wham presents Sierra Katow. Katow. Kate, well, she's good with my
All
butchering,
good.
but
Yeah, no, I all
yeah,
of those are good. I think it's like it's either you go phonetic route or you say the
yeah.
weird way that I that I request, and it's all it's all the same.
Sierra, tell us where we can find you on social media and give another plug for your projects.
Yes. Okay. Social media. I'm on Instagram mostly. Also TikTok, X, I guess, as well. All under my name, Sierra Katow. SIERRA KATOW, which is why it sounds like it looks like Katow. Katow. That's a fun one. And then, yeah, I mean, really, my special is a big thing right now that I want to share. So that's called Funt. I think so it's free for Amazon Prime members. So streaming on Amazon right now. If you just search Sierra Katow Funt, Funt, it'll be there. But also, if you don't have that, you can rent it on a bunch of other platforms. Just go on my website or go on Comedy Dynamics, which is who produced it. Yeah, and that's that. Follow me.
Awesome. Well, we hope you've enjoyed learning about how Sierra got to be the comedic genius that you heard today, just as much as I have. And this has been Comedy Wham presents Sierra Katow. I'm Valerie, and that's been funny. Thank you, Sierra.
Thank you. Thank you so much.